Hey, this is Jay.
And this is Chelsea.
Welcome to the Shifting Perceptions podcast.
We are bringing you inspiration to live a more creative lifestyle because our favorite people are the ones that choose the path less traveled.
Hey guys, this is Jay Alders, and I have a great episode for you. I spoke last week with fine artist Daniel Maidman. I found Daniel on Instagram. He has over 124,000 followers on there, so I clearly wasn't the first person to discover him. Daniel's a talented artist. He has quite a lot of accolades under his belt, including having paintings and drawings in the permanent collections of the Library of Congress and the New Britain Museum of Art. He also has art in Long Beach Museum of Art, and I even learned that Daniel has work going to the moon. Not in like a Bitcoin to the moon reference, but literally he has work going to the moon. Stay tuned. Lots to hear in this one. I think you'll enjoy it. Let me know what you think. If you're not driving, you can check him out while you're listening on Instagram at Daniel Maidman. And I'm on social media, on every social media possible, at jalders. And my website is jalders.com. And I also have a newly launched NFT collection on OpenSeas. So without further ado, let's get to it. I send you guys lots of love and respect and inspiration. I'm excited to talk to you, Daniel. I've been following your work like hundreds of thousands of other people have, and quite honored and appreciative of you making the time to chat about art and what it's like being a working artist. I'm excited to kind of dive into your brain and go one layer past your artwork. So thank you for that.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoy your podcast.
Awesome. Thank you, man. It means a lot to me. I guess I would really love to start at the beginning because like most of your fans and followers and collectors, I'm sure most people only know you at the surface level. And I would really love to know what you were like as a kid and how your creative interest and talents sort of manifested. What was Daniel like as like a 5 or 6 year old?
I'm told that I was very quiet and studious, or I don't know how quiet I was, but I was a loner until fairly late, and I would become serially obsessed with different topics. So I went through an astronomy phase and an anatomy phase, and I really enjoyed schoolwork, and I thought that I was going to wind up in the hard sciences until fairly late. And then I became completely obsessed with film when I was 13, and from 13 through 30 worked on being a director. And then when I became very clear that wasn't going to work out, I had a bit of a breakdown, and when I came out of it, I was an artist and a writer.
Wow, I didn't know any of this. This is really interesting. Directors, can you tell me more about that a little bit?
Well, I went to film school, and I really thought intensely about the aesthetics of film. But I didn't. There's a problem with film structurally, which is that it's so expensive that it rewards early bloomers. You have to get it right the first or second time out. And I found out much later than that I'm a late bloomer. It takes me years and years to get good at anything. So with the low capital investment field of art, I was able to spend, probably 15 years practicing and not doing very good work and no one noticing my work without it really impacting my viability as an artist. And you just can't do that with film. I shot a few shorts. They had good qualities, but they were, in other respects, catastrophic. I'm not a natural storyteller. And so those are skills that, I had to painfully learn one by one. But you don't have that kind of time frame with film. So it didn't work out.
You said something that I think is a good jumping off point. You mentioned about how you're not naturally good at things at first, and it takes a long time. And I think it's easy for any of us nowadays, honestly, especially since social media has become part of our DNA, to just sort of fall into the comparative struggles that we all have. It's very easy to flip through social media and see these artists like yourself who have, many people would say mastered part of their craft and assume that you just woke up one day and you've been drawing like that forever. But you just mentioned that even you have had struggles picking up things and mastering them. Was the visual arts one of those things that has taken you a while, or once you sort of committed to it, did it just sort of happen?
Okay, so this is I'm naturally very egalitarian in my outlook. So it has taken me a great many years to reconcile with the concept of talent, because talent is so deeply unfair. But I will concede that I was born talented, and that has helped me a great deal. But what's not clear sometimes from the outside is that talent is more of a potential than an actual thing. It enables your upper limit in the context of endless work and practice to be higher. And so I have been life drawing between 1 and 3 times a week for 23 years, and that's how I got to be good at that one particular corner of the enormous terrain of art that I happen to be good at. And so I was very, very fortunate to inherit genes from, as far as I know, at least 5 generations back for being able to draw. But in order to actualize it, I had to put in decades of practice. So it's a combination of those things. I know that there's this magic effect on social media where people are like, oh, they can just do it. I try to be as candid as possible about the amount of work I've put in, because I want people to not despair when they look at my work. Like, for instance, there's some artists that when I look at their paintings, I just have a sense of despair because I'm like, I can never do that. And then there are other artists who are very inspiring because, their work makes me want to run off and do some work. And I want to be of the second type. So I want people to know that wherever they are now, if they put in a lot of work, they can get farther along the way towards their ambitions. And even if they can't reach them, if they find joy in the process, then that's a substantial part of the reward of making art.
Yeah, I like that you touched upon that, how there's like sort of 2 types of artists, and I completely relate to that. And do you still find at this phase of your life that you'll flip through social media and see artists and be like, holy crap, wish I could do that? Or is that phase?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
No, that happens. And it's also, it's not just a technical thing. There's some people who have like a mood or a sense of imagery, or a scale of ambition. And I envy those things too. I'm very envious of other artists, but I try to be inspired and not just boil up inside.
I think that's important for young artists, especially, or people that have left art and struggle with the idea of coming back to it. That you don't have to chase perfection or compare to other people, even though there are so many incredibly skilled people out there. It's really hard for every artist I've talked to, including myself, including you, as you just admitted, to really acknowledge that you're never going to achieve a certain level, perhaps, or maybe it's more about your uniqueness more than anything else. And on the flip side, I wonder how you, or if you, take energy the other direction, because I also see the opposite as just as true on social media, where there's artists that have ginormous followings that shadow any of us, and technically speaking, or perhaps other metrics as well, you look at the work and I'm like, I just don't get it. I just don't know. I often question how much energy or thought could or should go into that. I don't think it's good energy to put out there to, internally.
I don't really think about it.
Yeah, you don't. Do you?
Yeah.
Do you ever?
No, I'll happily cop to being envious of people who can make art that I wish I could make.
Yeah.
I'm not really envious anymore of people who have success that I would like, even if I don't think that their work merits the success. Like that's just a poisonous way to think. I really aggressively disciplined myself out of that a long time ago. I think that you lose life and energy worrying about what other people are getting. And you even lose life and energy worrying about what you're getting. What you're getting is getting a chance to make the work. Everything else is icing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do agree with that, but I also am going to admit that I am vulnerable sometimes to falling in those traps of ego as well, even though I consciously put an effort towards that. And then I also sometimes look at the 50,000-foot view of art and art history, and just seeing where art has come from, like the noble lineage that we all come from as artists, and how different being an artist was, let's say, hundreds of years ago. This is just like a mental thought thing I go through. There's no really any purpose to doing any of these kind of types of thinking, but I think about how noble and learned and practiced, and what a noble practice it was to be an artist, and how nowadays it seems like anyone can just stick a banana on a wall, and it does make me question where art is going. So as being a member of the artist tribe, I often just can't help but wonder those sorts of things, even though it's not necessarily the best energy to put out there. Do you know what I mean?
I do. So there are two different categories of material success that we're talking about here. One of them is sort of like social media success, where somebody has like a zillion followers, and you're like, this work is really not very good. But the other type, you're talking about also blue chip gallery success, which is a whole different beast. And that one doesn't worry me because as far as I can tell, it's a sophisticated form of money laundering that sort of parasitizes some of the formal qualities of art without really being art. And I don't worry about that either in the present or historically, because in the present, I don't think those people are happy. Yeah. And historically, all of that will be swept away as soon as those particular investments, as soon as the inertia of the capital falls away. But you're looking at the liquidation of a lot of money to change anything. So there's a whole lot of money forming a picket fence around it. But that doesn't, it's all garbage. That doesn't even register. So
no, it's good to hear how other artists think about these types of topics. Diving into your work a little bit, Daniel, I'm like really curious. First of all, I love your balance that you have between simplicity and negative space with detail and texture. It's really fascinating to me. That's one of the things I find more interesting about your work, and I'm wondering if you are either consciously or unconsciously, have you seen your work kind of take shift in a direction more simplistic ways where you're using more line and more empty space? Or do you often find as you're drawing that you want to go deeper and deeper and bring out more complexity? Is that a balance that comes natural to you, or do you just kind of intuitively just see where the drawing leads you?
I really just see where the drawing leads me. Once in a while, I'll have an idea in advance. But one of the pleasures of life drawing, and to some extent drawing from photographs, which is a lot of what I've been doing for the past year and a half, is discovery. You don't dictate what the model's doing. You don't dictate what the opportunities are, and you have to awaken your eye to what's there and figure out how to respond to it. The use of negative space is part of a set of like qualities of paper that's always surprising to me. Like, I don't understand why it is that you can let a drawing fall off to a line and it just works. You can't do it in a painting. But paper encourages that, and it's so rewarding. And if you go too far, you can really tell. Like if you keep on rendering past the point you should be rendering, you lose both the composition and usually the quality of rendering. So figuring out how to stop with taking account of the role of the negative space and the line in the finished work, it took a while. I'm still learning that. It's great. I love it.
That's something that people often ask, I'm sure all of us, is how do you know when you're done? Have you come up with any kind of like wisdom on that to tell people?
No, I mean, I think you just kind of have a hunch. There's a way that I used to say is that it's done with the first brushstroke that makes it worse.
Yeah, great. I love that.
Yeah, I don't know if I got that from somebody or not. I can't remember anymore. I think I made that one up, but it was but you keep on going and it keeps on getting better and better, and then you put one in and you're like, ooh, that was worse. And what you have, the trick is stopping and living with the bad brushstroke, because if you start trying to fix it, you really screw up a lot. So you let it go and then you're done.
With my own work, I've found I work a lot with oil paint, and I've found that I will take a piece to a certain point, and then there's this moment where it's almost like either it's either falling off of a cliff and dying, or it's like jumping off a cliff and like sprouting wings. And it's a very tricky thing to know which one it's going to be when you like start putting down some brush strokes, and all of a sudden you're like, well, this takes it down a very different stylistic path. And this could be very bold and brave, or it could be really foolish. And it's still a struggle sometimes to know how far and deep to take a piece, or if you should just stay safe. I find that that's always an interesting topic for me as I'm painting, because it's hard to know when you're that close to it. And then often if you take a few days off or a week off, or you step back 30 feet, you're like, oh, now I see it. Do you kind of... yeah, go ahead.
Do you wind up having like failures that you have to walk away from?
I guess it would depend how you define failure. I try to have like an idea in my head of what I want to achieve with a piece, but then I find that the more successful I am at getting into the zone, the less my conscious self is actually in the driver's seat at all, and it becomes almost like very shamanic at a point. And then it almost feels artificial to jump back in the driver's seat and try to steer it back where I was going, as opposed to just letting go and just sort of being the person that's holding the brush as opposed to the person with a plan.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. I've been interested in seeing some of your work dabble more in color, which obviously is not new to you, but it is, following your Instagram feed, at least as the primary point of seeing what you're up to. I find it so interesting to see you're kind of dabbling in color, but at the same time, I've seen you post a lot more very simplistic line work. Are both of those directions something that you're finding yourself more interested in, or is it just more, just more stuff that's already in existence that you feel like bringing it back up a little bit?
When you talk about the line work, do you mean the second account that's just line drawings?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So it's two unrelated things. The line drawings, I've been doing those for years and years. I just wasn't posting them at all.
Okay.
And I just really love doing line drawings. And I tend to do like 20 minutes of those at the start of a session, just to, shake up my assumptions about how and what I'm seeing, and to let the model show me what like is natural to them, because they're going through 1 to 3 minute poses. So I have like thousands of those in stacks around the house. I'm just getting around to posting those finally. The color really is new. What happened was I was doing all of my work on either Reeve BFK tan paper or Canson's gunmetal gray paper, and Canson got bought, and they kept the part number, but they changed the color of gray and texture with that paper. So I can't get my gray paper anymore. And that gray paper was the absolute perfect value and texture for the way that I draw. And so I was able to get wonderfully subtle transitions of form and light with that paper, and it's just tragic that it's gone. But I had to start experimenting with paper again, and I started playing with Métis papers. I don't know how to pronounce it, and looking at color, and then everything got locked down, and so I wasn't under the time constraints of life drawing a lot of the time, which meant that I could really spend a long time doing color. And I know that color is something that I'm afraid of, and that's not natural to me. So I decided to try to work more of it into what I was doing, and I really like a lot of the results. Some of them are not very good, but it's really exciting to try something different.
Yeah, it really is, and there is something about just monochromatic drawings or paintings. There is something almost inherently magical about them. It seems to be easier to get it to work. And like you said, once you start introducing saturation and hue and color temperature, all of a sudden it's very easy to kind of mess up, and it's kind of easy to kind of slip and have it almost enter a realm of. I find that when I do stuff like that, it's almost easy to slip into a realm of cartooniness if you're not really careful enough with colored pencil, as opposed to painting the same image.
And my favorite filmmaker was Tarkovsky, and he wrote a lot about the difference between color and black and white. He naturally wanted to be shooting in black and white, and he was like, and and his argument was that black and white is more abstract, and it's detached from physical things, and it's more of an idea. And so if you want to communicate in terms of ideas, then you want to shoot in black and white. And he was very uneasy with color processing in film because he thought that it produced very garish results. And you could tell that he's not naturally a color guy. He's naturally a form guy, and that difference that he sensed between a spiritual and a material quality in black and white versus color is rooted in, as far as I know, the two different parts of the brain in which those perceptual capabilities originated. The form one's much older, and the color one is a sort of a recent add-on. And so they have different emotional and spiritual qualities for people. And natural colorists like Fellini or Almodovar really embrace the sort of frenzied emotional and symbolic qualities of color. And Tarkovsky was always trying to figure out how to achieve the quality and color that he had in black and white. And what he eventually did was he would shoot in color, and he would produce a black and white negative and a color negative, and then he would put them on top of each other and produce another negative, and he'd gradually bleach out the color that way because they didn't have digital timing back then. And he would produce a very restricted sense of color that corresponded with his understanding of the psychology of the perception of color, which is that it's much more muted unless you're paying attention to it than you get when you're shooting like Technicolor. And I don't know if it's that way for everyone, but apart from like sudden revelations of color, I have a more muted sense of the colors of things. And so I'm using these pencils that don't saturate very well. Like they're pencils that you can really get like a very rich color. And I'm using Prismacolor pencils, and they're not exactly famous for a high color load. And so I can get a hint of color. And a lot of the drawings that kind of look monochrome have a zillion different colors in them. And when you see them in person, you can see the colors much better. Scanning and posting to a telephone doesn't work all that great. But I've been easing myself into color, and then sometimes I'm using really wild and intense colors because I'm ready to commit occasionally to hitting a very high emotional or symbolic note, and color is really very useful for that. And the way it expresses itself is in like a very specific and distinct composition, where you're like, okay, that was an idea that happened beforehand, and then the drawing is an execution of an idea.
Hey guys, just a quick break. No fancy sponsors to let you know about. Just a reminder that both Daniel and I are working artists, and we totally would appreciate any support, whether that means going on social media and just saying, hey, or letting some friends know about our artwork, or if you're in the position to pick up some art, perhaps for a gift or for your home. Those types of things go a long way in helping to support artists like Daniel and myself. Other quick news. I was excited yesterday that I went to the skate park with my boys. I have twin boys that are 6.5, Grayson and Judah. And I had my first synchronized drop-in with my little boy Judah. We did a little drop-in on the mini ramp together, which was super cool. One of the highlights of my days yesterday. I love going to the skate park with them and seeing them enjoy the things that I love. Anyway, guys, just sending you lots of love. I appreciate each and every one of you. Speaking of materials, I would love to kind of tickle the artists that are listening, their curiosity on how your process currently is set up. You mentioned your papers. You mentioned Prismacolor. Is there a let's start with the live drawing versus going from a photo. So I have separate questions on that. So are you starting with like a very hard light pencil? Are you doing a lot of erasing? Like how do you set it up before the Prismacolor hits the paper?
Well, with life drawing, I'm still using my basic combination of a 3B graphite pencil, Stadler, and a white Prismacolor pencil. I mean, there are variations, but that's what I use for the overwhelming majority of them, and certainly for everything on the BFK paper, because the BFK paper does not take the waxiness of the Prismacolor all that well. The much harder less porous surface of the Metientes is much better with the Prismacolor. But I've been doing graphite and white on the BFK paper, which is like a very soft, heavyweight printmaking paper for a very long time, since like 2005. During which time they have surreptitiously reduced the paper weight repeatedly. It's much lighter now than it was when I started. But anyway, so I'm not using a lighter pencil. I'm using the same pencil I finish with. I'm just holding it lighter.
Interesting.
For life drawing. And the process is very similar for drawing from photographs, except that I'm looking at like a large high resolution monitor and I'm taking a whole lot longer to finish a drawing. And there's less of a spontaneous quality to it because like I'm not picking up details of an environment. There's a fixed image in front of me, which tends to induce a sense of fixed image in the drawing.
Your drawing skills are just superb, and I love it. Do you ever, or have you ever enjoyed using charcoals versus Prismacolor?
No, I hate charcoal. It's messy.
Yeah.
A lot of what I do is done with an eye towards storage because I do so much of it. And charcoals are a nightmare to store, and they get everything covered in charcoal. I did a lot of work with Conte when I started, but also, I could get really nice transitions of value in in large areas, but I couldn't get the edges where I wanted them. So it's easier for me to have it be easy to get outlines and then to fight my way through subtle transitions of value than it is to be able to easily do subtle transitions of value and then not have outlines at all.
That makes sense.
Because like shape is super important to me.
That makes sense. I was Daniel, I was diving through your website a bit just to kind of like take a deeper dive into some of your work, and I was like really super interested and taken back by some of the various styles you've kind of dabbled in over previous decades. Do you, since your current following is so strong with your current your current style that you're in with your color pencil nudes, do you ever feel, and I'm asking this as an artist knowing how it feels to kind of sort of feel stuck, but do you ever kind of feel stuck in or trapped by your own style or by your own niche or by your own expectations of what people are expecting from you? Do you ever just
to some extent, yeah. I mean, like, it's also it's not just that, it's that I'm making a living as an artist.
Yeah.
And so I have a natural bias towards things that I know I can sell.
Right.
I have the good fortune to be inspired by things that I can sell. So it's not like I'm doing work I don't want to do, but there's other work that I also want to do, which I have to treat as a cost. And so that's difficult, like finding the time to do it, because I also have a little kid that we're homeschooling for the past year and a half. And I have, and I write, and I'm married. So I have a lot of other things that I need to do. So I don't have it like all the time that I had when I was 20 to do art, which is frustrating. But so everything proceeds at a slower pace. But I'm starting work on a series of paintings that are very much not what I do with drawings. You just have to do other stuff. So I guess I feel stuck a little bit sometimes, but I find the nudes so endlessly inspiring that I really just want to draw them most of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I understand that. I'm super interested what your other work will be like. Can you give us a teaser on what your...
Nope.
Yeah.
No, it's going to be in like a year.
Okay.
I made the mistake of telling my gallery about the idea, and they were like, okay, next September you're on. So now I have to do it.
No teaser then, huh? Oh man. Okay.
Yeah.
It's it is just being honest here. It is refreshing to hear that from so many artists I speak to. Musical, art, visual, so many different creative people that find success, experience these really wonderful, high quality problems where it's like you get expected to put out certain kind of work and a certain kind of style, and a lot of artists that are looking in from the outside don't realize that is a reality, that there is truth to the fact that people do expect or anticipate your next piece to look a certain way. It's the same with having a favorite band. You want it to sound like that album or their second album, and they haven't sounded like that and blah blah blah, or so it's it is it's refreshing to hear that over and over again, even though I've heard it so many times before. It's a reality that artists that are looking to make a living from their art really need to hear and understand that you may love to do a certain kind of a work, but once it's your living, it is harder and harder to have that looseness and that ability to experiment just for the sake of the art itself.
Yeah, I recommend to people and try to practice myself, like simply allocating a certain fraction of your time to experimenting and playing, because you're just gonna go dead inside if you're not trying something different. Um, but yeah, there's very much of a practical demand for a certain type of work. And so I feel I'm very, very fortunate that I love to do that kind of work. But it's not all that I love to do, so I have to negotiate ways to do other stuff as well.
Yeah, those are important lessons to hear.
Hmm.
While we're on the topic of like business, I am very I admire the fact that you've really taken a lot of different steps to monetize for your family. I know you have books and you've done DVDs, and I've seen that you do some public.
Oh, I
public
don't make
speaking.
any money from those.
You don't make any money now. I assume that
No,
was
I
the
pretty much
initial.
only make money from drawings.
Okay, that wasn't the
Yeah.
initial. Would assume that was the initial intention, though. No.
No, I mean, I don't. I'm not very good with money, and I don't really care about it very much.
Okay.
Uh, and I speak, and it's not like I have money lying around that enables me to not care about it very much. I've suffered horribly because I don't care about money very much.
Mm,
Like I've been very hungry for extended periods because I didn't have any money, but I could not get the concept of money through my head.
right.
So I'm extremely lucky that I stumbled into being able to sell enough drawings to meet my financial obligations. But I could definitely be doing more. I was listening to your interview subject, the guy who like does a lot of street art and has like a zillion different lines, and I was
Oh,
like, God,
1000. Yeah.
he's amazing. And it's such a I felt like the place he was coming from in doing that was so innocent that it didn't cost him any integrity to succeed as a businessman, and I really admire that. I don't have that. I feel like I said, just incredibly lucky that I can sell drawings. The rest of it I do because I think it's like a fun thing to do. I say yes to lots of things because they just seem like good ideas. But the art books are with a very small publisher that has not sold, as far as I know, a whole lot of copies of them. And there's a very slim margin, and they're a nonprofit. So
Mm,
we're I don't think we're ever going to hit the point where I'm seeing royalties. I see like a small royalties from the DVDs, but not big. And if I took more initiative in producing those myself, like some of my friends have, I would definitely make more money from it. But then that would be my job, and I don't want that to be my job. I just want to draw and write and paint. So I'm willing to trade money for that. I guess it's something that I should maybe rethink at some point now that I say it out loud. But it's
yeah.
yeah. Anyway,
I
so
get that. It
yeah.
is it's a fascinating topic finding a way to reconcile that, because obviously, like you said, you have a child. I have three little kids, and
Oh, how old?
so my daughter is turning 8 in a couple weeks, and my twin
Uh-huh.
boys are 6.5.
Oh, that's great.
So it's a challenge. Like, and I found, like, before I became a dad, it was so much ego. Just not ego in like in a braggadocious way, more like I wanted to focus on me, and my art, my stuff, and my hobbies, and blah blah blah. And then after becoming a dad, it's my entire life, as I feel like it should, has shifted. And
Hmm.
it is a struggle sometimes, because I love art. I've always loved art. It's been my first love. Yet I find myself, if I have the opportunity to play with my kids or do something great with my family versus hiding in my basement and drawing,
Hmm.
it is less tempting and alluring, aside from the business aspects, which are very real and you can't ignore your bills. But just speaking as an artist, I've been I've been more inspired since becoming a dad, but I've also in some moments felt like drawing less, because I really cherish the time with my kids at this young age. It's happening so fast.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's yeah. On the other, I also find that like the more other demands there are on your time, the more productive you are when you get to do
Oh my God,
the
that's
art.
so
Like when I
true.
had endless time, I would like dig around a lot and not get things done.
Dude, oh my God, that's so true. I feel like I do have a very limited time. Like my kids are in public school now, but we were homeschooling for about a year, for the previous year, and
Hmm.
just having like a few hours a day to myself has been like so wild. I'm like, oh my
Hmm.
God, I can freaking like paint and not feel guilty about it or not have interruptions. And then when I do have that time, it's just like, very efficient, and
Right.
so that is good to kind of have that focus. I'm
Yeah.
curious. I'm curious to bring up a weird topic that's new and trendy. But what's your thoughts on NFTs and where the art world is certainly going currently?
I don't find them interesting.
Yeah.
Um, I think I've got like a few friends who are experimenting with it, and I wish them all the success. But like, those like wild stories that you occasionally read about with like things selling for like $1 zillion, I suspect are heavily orchestrated behind the scenes, like anything involving a lot of money. So it's not like uh, you're going to get discovered at the soda stand at Hollywood and Vine. Like, it's just another form of moving money from one account to another for purposes that have little to do with art. So I don't see the point of like getting worked up about it. I
Yeah.
could be wrong. I mean, I could be this could be the incipient creep of being older and not keeping up with technology. But I've done a little bit of reading about it, and I don't see the aesthetic opportunities as being anything new or distinct. So the excitement seems to me to be because of the structural qualities of the presentation and the allure of money floating around the ecosystem, and those are not interesting to me.
Yeah, I get that. It's an interesting topic. I
Hmm.
do find I do sort of understand it, but that the artisan within me that likes the tactile nature of painting and drawing, that side of me doesn't love art being reduced to a screen. But the
Well, I
nerd,
mean, how do you feel about like video installation and stuff like this? Kind of like that issue has been around in the art world since like the '70s, I guess.
oh man, I don't
I
know if
mean,
I
I've
want to
I've
go.
never been attracted to video art, but
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know if I want to go down that path of being like critical of others. I'm not a fan of video
uh-huh,
installations. I'm not a fan of duct taping bananas to the wall and selling it for
right.
$100,000. There's a lot of things in the art world that kind of, as an artist who feels, I think I take the weight of being an artist probably too serious at time, which is one of my things I'm trying to work on. But I have always thought of our craft or our trade or our hobby or our passion something that comes from a nobility. And I find that it's interesting to me that the visual arts are one of the only creative mediums where there's no standards anymore.
Hmm.
I acknowledge it. I understand it. I think there's some amazing work in so many different styles. Yet I also love the fact that certain mediums like ballet or cuisine, there's certain types of mediums that does have a definitive standard, and I struggle with trying to understand how the visual arts no longer has any sort of standard, which is, I
I
guess,
mean,
what I was touching upon earlier in our conversation, where you said you don't put any thought to it, which I totally think is probably a healthier attitude, you know?
well, I for a while I thought about it, and I think that there. I mean, if you want my hypothesis about it, I do
Yeah,
have like an idea
I
of
do.
where this comes from. I think there are two primary issues involved. One of them is that like this is like my what is it called? Uh, uh, mo- I think it's a monetary commodity or something like that. There are certain qualities that have to inhere in a substance in order for it to function quite well as money.
Mm,
Um, there has to be a small supply of it, but slowly expanding. It has to be chemically stable. It has to be divisible into relatively interchangeable units, and it has to be transportable to some extent. And if you think about it, art has all of those qualities. So it's very functional as a form of currency, but the thing about monetary commodities is like they can't have aesthetic value because it confuses where the value is coming from. So, like gold, right?
Mm.
There's gold that has numismatic value because it's an interesting coin or a rare coin, but the basic price of gold is determined simply by the quantity of gold. And gold is phenomenally useful as money because it's chemically stable, transportable, small supply but slowly expanding. You can move it around, and all these things. Art can do that, but it cannot have aesthetic value if it's going to do that. So that's why you have a guy was it Coons or Hearst that started out as a finance guy? Because
I don't know.
I think what?
I don't know, actually.
Yeah, well, one of them was a finance guy, and he never really left finance. He just figured out that art was a more fun way to do it. But like the reason that they put out hundreds of things that look similar, and then they'll announce basically a new product line and make hundreds of those, is that those are units of high-end currency in a properly diversified portfolio. But they cannot be different from one another, and they can't really have value apart from the name. And so, they produce these units of currency and they float around. They're anti-aesthetic, and they attract a great deal of money because they're a great storehouse of value. And what that means is that in order to maintain their legitimacy in the public eye as art, a whole bunch of museums and academics and critics and so on have been bought off in order to continue promoting this as art. And the only reason fundamentally that it has value, apart from its material qualities, is that art is of absolutely pivotal and fundamental spiritual importance. And so they're parasitizing something that human beings need and converting the needs of the soul into a form of cash. It's absolutely disgusting. That's why I don't think about it. And all of this garbage will be swept away once $1 trillion in capital melts into the mirage that it always was. The other reason is that I think we just have a crap culture. Our culture is not proud of itself, of its history. It has no ambitions. It has no hopes, and it's not going to survive. And so we're living in an age of ugliness, and our art reflects that.
Man, coming from the man who makes very beautiful artwork, it's so ironic, isn't it? So we're such contradictions of humans. That is, I hear what you're saying. I acknowledge that, but then it's our job to create beauty and infuse it into the world. I think that's part of our job as artists. And
doing my best.
Yeah, it's just interesting though. Like just looking at it from an outside perspective, like here you are, this guy that makes this beautiful artwork, and then you have obviously this understandable cynic side of where humanity and society is going at the same time. It's like it's like the struggle between the left and right brain that goes on within every working artist as well. I think it's interesting what you're saying, because that's really the essence of like cryptocurrency and the NFT branch of cryptocurrency. I don't know if that's the right word to use to describe it, but the NFT craze, the NFT innovation, it is interesting because you could actually take your drawings and make them into NFTs and then have the original drawing come with the NFT. And there's sort of a level of authenticity and provability to it that says such and such person owns this particular artwork. It's almost like a certificate of authenticity. So I do think that it is serving a function and a utility as opposed to just someone dropping $70 million on a JPEG.
Right.
So it's interesting to see how that technology will come about, and it is interesting to hear your theory or your thoughts on art being a form of currency as well. I think that when photography and photography and computers, I think, changed or killed a lot of what art used to be. Like back hundreds of years ago, before photography was around, we needed people like you to document the form or to document civilization. Then all of a sudden cameras came around. Now the artists were free to just sort of create whatever we wanted to, and it's been on a much different trajectory since a lot of innovations have come into society.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, there's the failure of art to understand the use of photography and the role of photography. I mean, I feel like you know, like the pinnacle of technical achievement in Western art was the mid 19th century. But if you look at the art itself, like it's also the point at which they lost track of what they were why they were doing anything. It's like very insipid art, and it's never really recovered from that. Like there are various forms of illness in our civilization that go back a very long time. I don't know the solutions to them. I don't even know that like I can define them. But like 19th century academic painting, most of it's just terrible. And yet no one ever painted as well as those guys. Like those techniques are staggering.
Yeah.
And they were capable of meeting the challenge of photography technically, but they had no idea of what to do.
I find it so much more interesting to look at that era. Like if you look at like I'm going to probably butcher the pronunciation of his name because I've only read it and not heard it, but
I don't know how to pronounce it either.
Ingrace.
Oh, Ang. Sorry, I thought you were going to say Bojaro or Boogaroo.
Oh,
actually,
yeah.
I love Ang.
I can't pronounce any of their names properly because I've only read them. But yeah, Bougerou or Ingray, I don't know how to say it still. But that type of work, I will go to a museum and stare at for hours, and it's just so much more appealing for some reason than staring at some of the work, the photorealistic work that you see today, which technically speaking is marvelous. It's incredible to see people are painting on this level today of pure photorealism. But I find it so much more interesting to look at a painting from like 100 years ago where they knew how to remove some of those details that weren't necessary, and it kind of has a romanticism about it.
I mean, if you want to think about that, like Vermeer is, for me, the master of.
Oh my God, yeah.
Because I mean, I didn't. Did you watch Tim's Vermeer?
No, I don't think I did.
Okay, it's a really interesting documentary. You know, Hockney did all this work trying to figure out exactly how Vermeer was using the camera obscura, because everyone kind of acknowledges that he used it, but no one seems to know exactly how he used it.
Okay.
And so Hockney got really close, but then there was this guy Tim something, who I think is an engineer, and he figured it out like exactly. And you're looking at it, and you're like, yeah, this is how it happened. And the thing is, and so he's like, I'm going to paint a Vermeer. So he paints a Vermeer, and it's not very good. Like it has a lot of the technical hallmarks of Vermeer, but it's not a good piece of art. And it makes you appreciate more Vermeer's understanding of his technology and of what it was good for and not good for, and what he had to supply as a living consciousness to the work. And so, like Vermeer, I guess I just think of Vermeer as like the king of working from photographs, and it's not really a photograph; it's like pre-photographic photographic equipment.
Right.
But like his sense of how to sort an image and of editing and emphasis and of the meaning of the artifacts of the lens. He doesn't reproduce the weird things that a lens does, like circles of confusion or chromatic aberration. He integrates those into a semiology of what the art is about, and that's amazing. That turns the traces of photography into a spiritual artifact.
Yeah.
So that's what he does as an artist.
Yeah, well said. That looking at his work, I mean, you could just stare at it. If the people at the museum let you, at least, you can stare at it from like an inch away, and I could stand there for hours. It's remarkable, the detail and the color value and the use of highlights. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
I would like.
Yeah, you can do that in DC. There's a few Vermeers there.
Yeah, I've been there. It's incredible.
Yeah.
I'd like to touch upon a topic, and if you're not comfortable with it, like please by all means let me know. You had mentioned before about a breakdown. I was curious if you would be willing or able to discuss that, because I feel like a lot of artists, myself included, have in the past struggled with mental health challenges. I have a mom that has debilitating bipolar, and I think that for myself, experiencing that, seeing my mom, struggle as she did growing up and going through some challenges myself, I think that pushed me to do art as a form of therapeutic release, and it's cathartic, as every artist knows. And I think it's unfortunately a reality that a lot of people that get into the creative fields comes from a place of needing the art just as much as being interested about doing the art itself. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to talk about those topics.
Yeah, I worry that I'm not. I mean, I don't. As far as I know, I don't have any significant forms of mental illness. And my worry is that it precludes me from being really great. But I cannot claim that I would go nuts if I didn't do art. But I'm not. I don't have that kind of dramatic relationship with it. When I say I had a breakdown, I spent like 9 months painting digital backgrounds for a science fiction short that I shot on green screen, and I got it done, and it looked beautiful. It wasn't that great, and it didn't get into Sundance, which was what I wanted for it. And that was the point at which I finally understood that no help was coming. And I was like, I cannot. Life is too short for me to continue loving something that doesn't love me.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to stop. And I was very unhappy for close to a year. And I felt like the unified impulse toward film fragmented into a visual and a verbal end. And so that was how I came out as an artist and a writer. And I had been practicing those for years already. I just hadn't taken them seriously as the direction I was going to go in. I had surplus time back then. I've never had an office job. And so I had a lot of extra time to do things that I found interesting. I find lots of things interesting. I'm very lucky that way. Like I find like so many more things interesting than I have time to pursue. But at that time I was writing and drawing and painting just because they were interesting and I enjoyed them. And then they became the main thing that I did once I jettisoned film. And for maybe 10 years after that, I couldn't really watch a movie. I saw movies sometimes, but the energy that it takes to maintain an open channel to spiritual transformation through that medium, I shut down. It's still not really up. I don't watch great movies anymore. I'm not looking for them. I'll read great books. I'll look at great art. I'll listen to great music, but I'm, bitter about film. So, that happened. It was intensely traumatic. It was I think my first great failure. That's the story.
You just mentioned failure. Do you have any tips for artists listening on how to deal with criticism and failure? Because it's inevitable. We're all going to experience it. Anyone trying something new. Do you have any practical advice for artists listening?
Yeah, I mean, the criticism and failure are two different things. It is very well worthwhile to develop a thick enough skin to take criticism. And that doesn't mean that you listen to everybody who comes along and says something nasty to you. But if you find somebody who has the insight and intelligence to tell you that there's a problem with your work and what the problem is and what the avenues forward are, that person is a treasure. And it's the critic Jerry Saltz talks about how artists have a hard time taking criticism because they transfer themselves into their work. So to criticize the work is as if you're criticizing the validity or legitimacy of the person. And if you're serious about your work, you have to develop a sub-region in your psyche that understands that it's two different things, and you have to get better at it. And one of the ways that you get better at it is getting outside perspectives. So that's criticism. I had an extremely critical art teacher in high school, and it was to some extent traumatizing and to some extent inuring to the difficulty that most artists have with criticism. So it had pluses and minuses. A lot of the artists in my class stopped being artists because of her behavior. But I have like a really strong ego, so it wasn't as much of a problem for me. As far as failure goes, I think that failure is incredibly important I think that we learn from failure. When I was in my early 20s, I would start to see the people around me fail at things for the first time, and the things that they wanted out of their lives, they wouldn't get them. And very few people get exactly what they want. And when people do get exactly what they want, it often turns out that it doesn't give them what they thought it would. But when you don't get what you want and you fail, it transforms who you are, and it's a proving ground for the kind of person you're going to become. So I saw a lot of people become worse people, and I saw a lot of people become better people. So failure is, a really, really important part of your passage towards adulthood. And then once you've gotten through it and you realize you didn't die, hopefully, you can recognize its value next time. Failing at something teaches you a great deal about what the thing is that you were trying to do, and whether you want to keep trying to do that or you want to change your plan. It's just part of doing things. If you are not enjoying the process of moving towards making art, then art is probably not your thing. But the part of that process is failure, and even though it's painful, it has that same sort of like profound joy that every part of the process of making art involves. So, that's my theory of failure.
So, jumping to the opposite of that topic before we wrap things up, I'd love to know, being an artist at the level of success that you've experienced, I would love to kind of know, has there been, or is there a moment, or was there a moment where you were like, or maybe you haven't even achieved that, this moment in your head yet, but where you said, I've made it. I no longer have to stress. Things are stable. I'm good. I guess the first question is, have you achieved that to yourself? And if so, what were the first moments like when that feeling of like, holy crap, I did it. I've had a lot of struggles, but I'm in a place where things are solid. I've got enough stuff going on. Can you talk about that?
I'm trying to think if I feel that way. My day job has always been educational consulting.
Okay.
And so that dried up in 2020 because school was out forever. And all of a sudden I was entirely financially dependent on art. And for whatever reason, that was the point where my art sales went up enough that I was able to survive and had one of my better years ever. And so I felt kind of startled and a little bit shell-shocked, and I didn't want to depend on it, because it's not like you show up to an office and you can expect a paycheck every 2 weeks. You're depending on people turning up out of the blue and wanting to buy artwork. But the thing that I had to reconcile with, as far as your idea of success goes, is that I had developed a large enough following on Instagram that, statistically speaking, it was likely that every few days somebody who themselves had gone through a several-year process of thinking it over would get to the end of that process and say, yeah, I want to buy a drawing. And they would show up and buy a drawing. And it became predictable. And that was really, it was really moving. I find it very touching that people want to own my work enough to exchange the money that they worked for to have it. And then they frame it and they put it on their wall and they treat it well. And one of the things that I like about selling directly instead of through a gallery is that I get to be in touch with my collectors. I really treasure, having contact with the people who have that kind of an intense relationship with my work. And I'm very grateful to them. And then I get to have this experience all the time. So that's really great. And that's a relatively new thing. And, the reason that I hesitate to say that I feel successful is that I feel like that could go away. I can't depend on it. And with Instagram's erratic behavior lately, I could certainly have my account torched with no recourse. And that's something that I really need to be thinking about more about how to survive that, because I've seen it happen to a lot of artists. But the so I don't have a sense of reliability about it, even though it seems statistically likely to continue. But I guess I'm less anxious than I was before about anyone ever wanting to look at my work. I went through a long time where I was like, no one wants to look at my work, and the work I was doing was not very good. I think it's better now. Um, and it doesn't mean I'm content with it, but like I can recognize that I'm accomplishing more of the things that I set out to accomplish. So I guess I've like gradually moved towards a state of having reached a lot of the metrics of success that I set out at the beginning. But I have that, they describe this sort of like persistent sense of anxiety that CEOs of successful companies have, who have founded their companies, that like even after they meet all of their goals, they wake up at night in a panic because they're scarred by the experience of failing with their companies for such a long time. And I really empathize with that. I feel like it could all go away. So that's my feeling about success.
Yeah, I completely relate to everything you just said. It's impactful. Have there been experiences over the past year or two? It seems like over the past few years, it seems like the trajectory of your career has sort of went upwards by your own admission. Have there been some sort of pinch me moments, whether it be an opportunity or a certain collector or a certain experience? Have there been some? Yeah,
yes.
Can you tell me about that?
Yes,
I love
they're
hearing about
sending
those.
my work to the moon.
Wait, what?
There's I'm involved with an organization called Poets and Artists.
Okay.
And that it's been various magazines and shows. It's run by a very driven woman named Didi Menendez, who's just amazing. And she published a book of poetry by a Canadian guy named Samuel Peralta.
Okay.
And Peralta's a really interesting guy. He's involved in nuclear engineering. He's a serial entrepreneur, writes poetry. He's produced films and music. He's like, he sort of does everything. A very high energy guy. And he was involved with some science fiction writers who figured out that they could hire out basically a micro SD card on a private spaceship and make an archive of their work on the surface of the moon.
Oh my God.
And so he was like, I want to do that for some artists that I'm friends with. So he hired out his own chip and stuck a bunch of issues of Poets and Artists in it. So I've got like 7 drawings that are supposed to be headed to the moon early next year. And also he's involved with the Long Now people to some extent. And those are like people who think about technologies designed to last for a very, very long time. And they've developed, I think this is part of their community, is the nanofiche, which do you remember microfiche?
Yeah, I do actually.
Yeah, it's like photo-reduced plastic imagery on plastic film. That was how libraries used to store newspapers, and you had to use this sort of like microscope viewer to read the newspaper. And nanofiche is a lot like that, except for it's like orders of magnitude smaller, and it's etched onto nickel plates. So you basically have to nuke it to destroy it, and so it's 300,000 DPI. Like the letters are the size of a bacterium.
Whoa.
But they're putting grayscale images of artwork on this stuff, and they're sending one of those to the moon as well, which is going to be much hardier in the extremely hostile environment of the moon than a micro SD card. So that was a pinch me moment, getting to the moon.
That's crazy. That is so cool, man.
Yeah. I'm still not quite over that one.
Oh my God. I wish I knew that earlier. I would have started out with that. That's like so nuts. Holy moly, man.
I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, you should be. I'm excited for you. Holy
Thank
crap.
you.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I want to continue on this light note, and then we'll wrap things up. But I'm sure there's some people listening that either have thought about or wondered what it's like to be a naked model sitting in front of an artist. Can you speak to perhaps any people listening that and sort of blow the myths or the misconceptions?
Yeah, it's not sexy.
Yeah, I remember when I first started dating my now wife, I was like doing a lot of photography at the time as one of my many creative side hustles, and I was doing some boudoir work, and I was trying to explain that it's like when you're in the moment of like drawing or painting or doing photography, your head's not, it's not in a sexual place. You're like trying to do the work, but I would love for you to kind of talk upon that for both artists as well as people that are thinking about someday. It's on my bucket list to pose, let's say, if someone's thinking.
I can't. I don't feel like I can speak. I mean, I can make guesses about what it's like for models, but all I can speak for is myself.
Sure.
You're too busy drawing to be turned on,
right.
At all during that experience. And I recognize that it's like a classical sublimation. Like you're taking energy that in other contexts would go into sexuality and using it instead for art. But what it means is that it's not available for sexuality. You're channeling it into a different set of drives that produce an output that's easily confused for its energetic cousin, but it's not the same thing. So like, and with life drawing workshops, I don't know if this is the case anymore, but when I started in the 90s, there were always a couple guys there that you could tell that like they were there instead of being at a strip club.
Right,
and they weren't really drawing.
Yeah.
And like they would eventually get kicked out. But they would turn up again and again. And that's not what it's for, and that's not what it's like. It's when you really get into the zone, I think it's like every other zone. It's clarifying and absorbing, and you exist without distraction or side thought, and it's like a revelation of the truth and beauty of things. But because we relate so profoundly to other human beings, and also just as machines, we're so beautifully designed. So that's what it's like as an artist. For models, there are several different impulses that I've noticed among models. Although I've known a disproportionate number of models who are also nurses,
okay.
And I think that the psychology of modeling often involves the caretaking impulse that is related to nursing as well. And I've talked with a couple models about it, and they seem to think that that's not off base, that there is a caretaking impulse in modeling. There are certainly a few exhibitionists out there, and being a nudist is not the same as being an exhibitionist. An exhibitionist gets off sexually on being looked at by other people in public, and you run into them, and there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not a voyeur, so I don't have a corresponding kink. But
right,
they're fine people. And then there are people who are pursuing it from fundamentally the same position as people who do any of the performing arts. People for whom their body is an instrument, and like a lot of them have dance backgrounds. Some of them have like exercise backgrounds, and so they find modeling to be a very functional tool of personal expression, and they're really cool to work with as well. Like I'm working privately with models mostly at this point, so I work with people I like, and they bring a lot to what I'm drawing. So, I've thought a lot about why they do what they do. Some of them are just trying it out. A lot of people are getting over, some sort of like issue they have with their body.
Yeah.
And they don't model forever. Like they get over the issue and then they're able to move on. but that it's a privilege to be part of their process of healing in that way. And there are a lot of different motives. It's not for everybody. I don't think that like you should just be like, oh well, lots of people model and there's no stigma, I should model. Like, there's a certain leaping off point that's not right for everybody with modeling. But like a lot of people do enjoy modeling.
It is nice being part of the process to remove like the cultural shame that a lot of people carry. And as the artist, there's also something very spiritual almost to document and create it's similar to creating like a landscape that's an unobstructed view with no buildings and untouched. There's something very natural and pristine and something very the way it should be feeling with figurative work in the same way that a beautiful landscape might be. It's unobstructed by a man-made clothing or a building or structures, and there's a vulnerability to it. And I think that's, at least in part, what a lot of people connect with your work, and it's one of the things that I love about it. And I appreciate you being on with me, Daniel, for so long. I really do appreciate that so much, because I'm rooting you on and loving your work. Is there anything else that either I haven't touched upon or that you'd like to bring to the attention of people listening?
I don't think so. I mean, no, I feel like we talked about a lot of interesting stuff. It was a great conversation. Thank you for all the thought you put into what you wanted to talk about.
Awesome. I loved it. And the best way for people to find you, I assume, is danielmaidman.com, and then your Instagram. Are there any other galleries or sites or anything else that people should dive into?
I would recommend Instagram and my website. And the Instagram is at Daniel Maidman. Those are where I'm posting current work. Yeah.
And I saw recently, which you don't usually do, you've been kind of posting some prices. So I think it's fair to say that for people listening that want to get into your work, there are very cost-effective ways to pick up a piece and add one of your pieces of art to their home for a price that's affordable for most people.
Yeah, I deliberately underprice a lot of my work because I want people to have it. It doesn't do me any good for it to be in a box.
That's awesome.
So it's a little bit lower than many of my contemporaries in a similar career position, and that doesn't bother me.
That's great. Well, thank you, Daniel. It's awesome. It's great to chat with you, and I hope to stay connected. And I will. I'm excited to get this out to people so they can check out your work and kind of learn a little bit about you.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here.
Awesome, Daniel. Thanks, man.
Thanks, guys. We hope you loved that episode. If you did love it and could give us some love on iTunes, that would be amazing. You can leave a review, and we will give you a shout out at some point on this podcast.
Also, if you guys can follow us on social media, we would love to hear from you. We are on pretty much every social media platform at Shifting Perceptions Podcast, which is the same as our website, shiftingperceptionspodcast.com. We look and reply to all comments, so please share with your friends, tag us. We appreciate all the love.
And don't forget that all of our guests also see all these comments, so I'm sure if you want to just have a space you can reach out, these are the places to do it.
Special thanks to John Harvey for creating and editing and producing our show's music, and thank you to Kevin Rigby for our photo of our podcast. Appreciate you guys all. Talk to you soon.